Okay, I'm going to fly into the Symphony Framework community. I'm going to talk about Symphony and what it is, but hopefully try and give you an idea of why we've put the community together and hopefully get a few of you interested in looking at it. So anyway, let's just get into it and see what happens. So, welcome to the Symphony Community Project. In this session, we're going to go and explore the Symphony Framework community project as a whole, what it is and why you may want to get involved with it. I guess in today's computing world, there's so many things these days to consider and so many options that sometimes it becomes rather overwhelming, everything you can do, and especially trying to keep up with technology, latest versions and all that kind of stuff. You may be thinking, for example, about building your Synergy applications as application servers. We've talked about Symphony Bridge and Symphony Harmony and things like that. And that'll enable you to host your business logic and data on remote servers, for example. The client possibilities are totally endless. Today, many of you still support cell-based applications, but more than likely, that's not the target of new developments just yet. Of course, the desktop is still a major target platform, and the demo we saw yesterday was an absolutely fantastic example of that. Having a web presence is essential today, and mobile is gaining momentum, and not just on the phone, but on devices around the warehouse, etc., etc. It's all an integral part of mobile computing. The trouble today is finding the information you need to understand the various technologies is always available in books, manuals, online help files, and obviously Google searching. Where would we be today without Google searching? We're going to do some Google searching in the post-conference workshop. Trouble today is that most of the information is related to languages such as C#. And we're not C# developers. I know we do C#, but we're Synergy developers. Synergy-related resources are relatively limited. Our online manuals are great if you know the routine or the class you're looking for, but trying to find out how to do something, it's a little bit different and not necessarily covered in those manuals. So that's why the community project was started. It's basically designed to provide working code examples that you can review and use if you want to better understand not just how Symphony, but the whole Synergy.net stuff works together. Creating powerful and rich desktop applications today requires potentially an in-depth knowledge of XAML, certainly from the demo yesterday. So you can isolate your user code. Web development, you've got to know HTML, JavaScript, etc., and be able to communicate with remote servers. On the server, you're going to need to provide quick, responsive methods to provide client connections with data that they need, when they need it, and how they need it. This may be in the form of web services, of which there are many formats and protocols, some of which Steve will talk about later with the RESTful stuff. Moving from traditional form of programming, which is cool, into full-blown object-oriented style with inheritance, polymorphism, encapsulation, can be mind-blowing if that's not the sort of upbringing you've had. Your bookshelf's going to get pretty crowded. Of course, you can watch videos. Videos is a great way of learning new technologies. Everybody goes to YouTube when they want to see something these days. And of course, if you're after Synergy-specific stuff, there's related videos, and this would be your first stop, the YouTube SynergyX channel. On this point, you can watch previous conference sessions. Some of them actually include me, but you can bypass those. And there are new videos coming out online that will help your new hires understand Synergy and how it all hangs together. And you saw some of that yesterday in Bill's session. But sometimes it's best by learning by example, by exploring examples. Seeing how it can be done in a working solution can not only help you better understand the technology that you're trying to get to grips with, but in fact, when it's written in Synergy, it's a real bonus. So the Symphony Framework example solution is a Visual Studio-based development that's stored up on GitHub. It's public, everybody can get to it. GitHub is a cloud-based source repository server that allows you to have both private and public repositories. The link to the Symphony Community Project, which you can use directly from within Visual Studio, is this. It's a bit long-winded, you don't need to write it down. I can see you all jumping for your pens. You don't need to remember this link. Just visit GitHub and search using your favorite browser. There's that word search again. So, what are the technologies that we're actually using? I guess the title is a bit of a giveaway. Of course, Symphony Framework's heavily used, and it's the best place to learn about what Symphony is. It's all written in Synergy.net. At the heart of a Symphony project is a data object. I've mentioned data objects a number of times. In the most simplest form, they expose your Synergy data, your alphas, your decimals, your implied decimals, as bindable object properties, and handle internally the conversions from those Synergy types to the .NET types that you want to hook things into. But they also offer a whole lot more. Obviously, alpha and decimal fields convert to strings and integers, etc. But there's more clever converters all built into Symphony that'll take an alpha yes, no, or a decimal field and convert them to booleans. So if you've got old data, you can expose it as nice, new, sexy data in the .NET world. Data objects are code generated. You don't write any of the code. You use CodeGen and the various templates that we provide. You need the repository. I've always said for many, many years how instrumental the repository is to be successful with a Synergy development. Taking the time to build up your complete repository will save you an awful lot of time. You can easily enhance these data objects and extend them without breaking the code generation process. Maybe add image properties or data that you can't easily define or hold inside the repository. You can code generate file I/O classes that work on indexed and relative files. These extend the base file O class in Symphony and provide complete thread-safe access to your local and remote via XF server files. The base class also isolates the channel reference and prevents unsafe cross-thread access to that channel and thus your data, and thus mess your program up. This ensures that you always access the channel on the correct thread. The base file O class provides inbuilt ability to perform optimistic locking. It remembers the GRFA under the hood when you've loaded that record into the data object. That ideally helps deadlocking, which is a real pain for many customers. And records are not updated when the underlying data changes. So if something else has changed it, your process won't get to update it. Now, specific to XAML, notice I said XAML here and not WPF. Symphony provides a simple commanding framework that works against any XAML-based command-bindable object, namely a button. These objects, for example, can be a button. Again, notice I'm saying XAML all the time and not WPF because Symphony is not just about WPF. Symphony today can be used to develop great-looking, powerful WPF desktop applications, yes. But commanding, data objects, in fact, many of the Symphony framework capabilities, not everything, but many, are not just about WPF. It can be used when you're building UWP apps, the newest technology from Microsoft, okay? And don't forget Xamarin Forms-based solution we talked about in the Physio My Way presentation yesterday. That's all on the phone using Symphony data objects, and it's all bindable to, etc. In the post-conference workshop on Friday, which you all need to attend, we're going to use Symphony all the way from the server to the client and onto an Android device and show a complete solution. Now, one thing that is specific to WPF is the ability to provide styles. Styles are code generated from the repository and take the field attributes, the toolkit type field attributes, things like prompts and validation, and put them into a style which you can then use to define the fields on your WPF input forms. Things like selection processing change to drop-down lists. Error notification using colours and tooltips when change method processing signals data. All the things you're used to in Toolkit if you've been using Toolkit. Many of the Toolkit attributes are valid in these modern environments. They're just done and handled and displayed a different way. Styling based on standard controls provides sort of out-of-the-box repository-defined edit controls. Capabilities in the repository like drill methods are handled. Simple search controls are provided that do the same sort of thing as your existing drill methods. Of course, you can easily build your own search lookup controls, and you're not confined to those provided by the Symphony framework. There is a customer in this room who, due to their requirements, we utilize the powerful infogestics controls, but we created the same styles using a slightly different template that targets infogistic and not the standard out-of-the-box Microsoft controls. Using styles, you ensure that your complete UI is consistent across all forms. And it is a slightly different way of doing it than what was shown yesterday. And again, if you need to customize a particular file, you can do. You're not set in stone. It has to look like this. Collections of data are an integral part of your application today. The ability to load a collection of data and bind directly to a data grid or tabular data presenter exists in probably every application you write today. Thread-safe processing is a very important aspect of Windows programming. It's how you can ensure that programs can perform and don't give the user that dreaded not responding experience. Symphony provides thread-safe collections that are observable. What that means is when the data changes in the underlying collection, the UI gets notified. But the notification will always happen on the right UI thread, so you can chunk notifications together and then update your UI. The utility classes allow you to dispatch blocks of code or logic or whole methods into controlled threads, and it's all managed on the right thread. And anything that you then need to update the UI, the Symphony will handle all that for you. Managing visual aspects of the UI, vital to provide the user with the experience of moving from one form to another in an animated way, bringing objects into view and animating them so they grow or shrink, etc., has to be seamless for the user. Symphony provides a visual state management framework that enables you to control moving to and from states. It's very much like e-enter and e-exit, but on steroids, really. It also handles focus control. Focus control in WPF is probably one of the most difficult things you can do. It just doesn't lend itself to focusing. Symphony Harmony provides quite a simple mechanism. Doesn't force focus, it says, can I have focus? And the UI then handles it. As well as thread-safe I/O-based classes for direct file access, you can utilize Symphony Harmony. Symphony Harmony provides the ability to access data and store procedures, that's synergy logic, using a simple SQL-style syntax. It's actually a cool way to program and access synergy data without having to know about the setup of keys and how to read a record and how to read the next record. You simply say, select all those records or just those columns. The same code to select data, insert data, or even update and delete records from a file is compatible on all platforms that Synergy.net runs on: Windows, Android, iOS. Symphony Harmony gives you the ability to manage the data in the SDMS files using, as I said, SQL syntax. So you can select data, you can modify data, and you can delete data. You'll use work clauses to say what data to modify or to delete. That data can be accessed locally or across a LAN or a WAN using Symphony Bridge. Again, another plug for the post-conference workshop on Friday. We're going to be using Symphony Bridge. I'll show you how to configure Symphony Bridge on a remote Windows Azure server, put our methods up there, our server libraries, and off we go. All of these are used within the Symphony example solution. Now, although not utilising the Symphony framework, there's so much more to learn, and this is what we're just adding into this environment. Everything's written in Synergy.net, so it's a way of getting into absolutely cool capabilities of Synergy.net. Visual Studio, it's the best way to program. You can hone your language skills in both the Synergy.net capabilities and the vast array of .NET framework capabilities and classes that are out there. And all the time, yes, it's using Symphony Framework. I'm sorry about that. Of course, Visual Studio, as Marty said earlier, and you'll hear throughout the week, is the IDE of choice. And why not? It's a powerful development environment that knows everything there is to know about Synergy Traditional and Synergy.net. The main solution in SFE, as we call it, contains a number of projects that provide access to different capabilities. Simple and complex OO techniques are explored. Okay? The code shows you a simple class, inheritance, extensibility, as well as code that uses a reflection names trace to create dynamic instances of types. See how to use this in PSG PDF generation classes that build professional looking PDF that Steve talked about yesterday. The code also uses standard Windows printing API. So if you want to see how to do that and you're not doing it, there's some samples in there. We're also beginning to provide non-Synergy.net, so provide examples of utilising Synergy.net technologies such as XF Server Plus. Okay? So we're creating server-based libraries that are showing code attributing and exposing data through XF Server Plus. Symphony Bridge, Symphony Harmony doesn't replace all that, it enhances it. We've got Workbench workspaces which we'll carry on using until we can do it all in Visual Studio, that create the XF Netlink clients. So what does it all look like? There are a number of projects in the solution, and one of them is the application shell. Don't get excited, this is nothing like the fabulous demo you got yesterday. This is the most simplest shell you will see. Currently it loads and allows execution of a few simple maintenance programs. The shell is driven by icons. I'll plug the icons here, www.icons8.com. The simple file maintenance program here uses a grid to display the allowable selecting of product items. The code-generated data objects have been extended to include images that you can see both in the grid and in the input form. You can move the highlight and the items in the input form change to reflect what's on the grid. If you make modifications in the input form, that greys out the grid and says you can't go back to it, and then you can carry on making changes. Button availability at the bottom, new, delete, will change to save and cancel. And this program's written using a base file maintenance class that has just a few lines of code. There's probably less than 10 lines of code in that program. But it uses many of the capabilities inside Symphony. You can take that file maintenance and go and write your own if you wanted to. Visual state management that I discussed allows you to display and process drill or lookup methods and navigate to visual states that provide those capabilities to the user. The code uses all of the techniques we've talked about in Synergy.net and the Symphony framework. That slide then was showing you a bit of Symphony harmony. So, it's time to get involved. If you want to play around with a bit of a bit of Synergy.net, bit of Symphony, then remember the link on GitHub, search for the solution, and you can type this, or you copy and paste it, straight into Visual Studio, this link, and your complete solution will come down to your hard drive. And it'll be there, it'll be buildable, runnable, all the images, all the data. You might need to install GitHub extensions for Visual Studio if you're not using GitHub today. Just remember the name, Symphony Examples, and visit github.com and search for Symphony Examples. It could not be easier. Now, if you want to start contributing, and everyone in this room and beyond is welcome to, then please send me an email with your GitHub account. It's easy and free to set one up if you don't have one. Not an email, that is, a GitHub account. I'm hoping you've already got emails. You don't need to contact me if you just want to look at the projects and the code and use it and play with it. But if you want to contribute, we want to put you into the contributors list. So fire me an email. So how can you make the Symphony Examples Community Project part of your success stories? At this point, I am going to invite Gordon Ireland to the stage. Gordon has been instrumental in helping to set up and get the Symphony Examples solution off the ground. Gordon has used the community project very much as a learning exercise and has some great stories to tell. So if you would all please welcome Mr. Gordon Ireland.
Okay, so what I want to cover now is a little of my background, how I came to this, why I was so keen to learn the Symphony framework with Synergy.net, cover how the community project really came about, and then how we actually layered on all of those concepts. A few years ago, I would have been sitting there thinking this is all way above my head, but as Richard was actually going through, we do this, we do this, we do this, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's great, and the harmony stuff's great, and yes, I remember getting to grips with that. Then I want to do a brief demonstration of what we pulled together. And in my own experience, then, as well as working with this, I was also working with a client who was wanting to completely modernize their application. They'd taken it from VMS, they'd taken it onto Windows, but it was still low-level Windows. Relative files, DDF files. They said, look, I want a great file structure, I want something that's more robust, I want a great UI. We've spent 30 or 40 years building this system. I'm coming up to retirement, I want to hand on a system that's fit for purpose for the 21st century. And so he's actually engaged me to write his complete system end-to-end in this. And so I want to just spend a few minutes discussing some of the issues then which arose coming from a nice simple training exercise into the real world, and then finally just let you see some of the screens of how that came about. Okay, my background was I was not someone who has programmed in 15 .NET languages, developed websites for a living and whatever. I was strictly traditional DBL, DIBOL as we called it in those days, from 1978. And then we moved into UI Toolkit around about 2000. But in parallel with moving into that, I was moving into management. And so I was responsible for the product design, for its support, for its sales, for its delivery, for how much money it made, etc., etc., etc. And so I tended to move away from the coding side. So I had no real hands-on coding for around 10 years. Although I was still called in from time to time when, why does this not work? So on the late night sessions, everybody gets involved in that. However, I was always very keen to maintain an awareness of where the Synergy language was going and how we could apply that into our product set, even if I wasn't the one actually doing it. So that was the primary route for doing that, was through the SPC and DevPartner conferences. And our company had undertaken a couple of proof of concept Synergy framework or Symphony framework projects, but I wasn't involved at the coding level, just more at the requirements and how it fitted into the product set. 2 years ago, I was made redundant following a restructuring, and I set up my own company offering Synergy-related services. My first client was a client that had been involved with PSG, and they were moving from traditional Synergy on Alpha onto Synergy.net with low-level Windows on a Windows platform. And that really took me into the whole Synergy.net and working within Visual Studio. But I needed to know, if I was setting up this company, what was the company actually going to do? The opportunities for traditional Synergy are very limited. Many of the systems are just in care and maintenance mode, or else they have people that have supported it for the last 30 or 40 years, and they do very nicely, thank you. Within the company I was in before, we had had experiences with trying to bolt on pretty front ends to our toolkit application through things like intranet, web front end, CRM, C#. And these were all written by people who were non-Synergy, not aware of Synergy ISAM files, data types, etc. And there were downsides on those things. However, I was aware that the Symphony framework side gave the cutting-edge UI that was needed, but it was working directly with the Synergy DBMS data, and it was reusing business logic when you could. So that was something that was very attractive to me. And as I said, I had a client that actually wanted to move into this area. And I was also aware of other clients who were happy with their core Synergy accounting application, but they were struggling with things like front ends and call centres or field engineers or wanting things on tablets and smartphones and what have you, like everyone else is aware of. A few months after being made redundant, I attended a Synergy Summit meeting in 2015. And at that stage, there was a group of customers, there was a group of Synergy people saying, we've got all this great stuff, how do we get it out there? How do people actually take it on and adopt it? And so, coming out of those discussions, Richard agreed to work with myself on the community project. The idea was to take a simple application that was based around products, suppliers and orders, but without all the baggage that comes with a real application. Our product file doesn't have 300 fields and 15 sets of pricing rules about how we arrive at prices and discounts to different customers and suppliers. It was just very simple, a code, a description, a date field, a price field, a tick box and whatever. As Richard said, the idea was to have simple, clear-cut examples that people could look at and refer to. As I said, initially it was just Richard and myself, but then the project expanded towards the end of 2016 to include one of the PSG consultants, Alan Schickvarg. Okay, so what we did was, and bearing in mind I knew nothing about XAML or file objects or any of this stuff, objects, classes, methods, but Richard provided a simple example. It was just a data grid that was a list. Then I took that and produced my supplier view, but then I wanted to expand it. I want to explode the record out. I want to learn how to colour the background and get different types of fonts and just play around with it. How to have so that if you click here, it automatically does something here. And I used a lot of Googling, looking at examples. And then when I got stuck, Richard stepped in, and when I thought it was working, then Richard reviewed the code. And so we developed as we went. We were just really in quite early days of this at last year's conference. I was talking to Richard and Steve Ives about it, and Steve was saying, look, we're really interested in your experience coming to this from your background, because there's so many other clients in the same position. And it would be really helpful if you could actually document those light bulb moments when something finally clicks and makes sense. And so what I did was, as I was going through, I documented as I went, and it's a mixture of narrative and some of the theory as I learnt it, and the worked examples and code walkthroughs and said, this is what's going on here. Basically it goes through and says, this is how we did it, this is how the maintenance class was, how you add a button, how you add an image, and so on. With also some discussions on the differences between the file I/O objects using Harmony, the implications on record locking, working alongside existing applications that do the hard, non-optimistic locking, and then how that works with a system where you're trying to use optimistic locking and updating via GRFAs. So the starting point was actually just getting to grips with Orchestrator, building the file objects, and then seeing how that compared with Symphony Harmony. So we hadn't actually got into any I/O whatsoever. Then we moved on to simple data grids, as I said, then the printing stuff, and then we started putting together simple file maintenance programs, and we looked at how we brought in the straight out of the box repository stuff through the styles, the dates, selection lists, checkboxes. And then we looked at things like validations like, well, I have to check that supplier code you've entered actually exists, and I want to display his name, and I want you to give me a drill, a lookup on it, and I want a picture of the product. And then structuring all of those into just, instead of just being a standalone project that threw up a screen, well, how do you actually build this together into an application with a menu and navigate your way around it? And then finally, and where we've really got to the stage at the minute, is how do we work with detail lines? So it's okay maintaining a supplier or a product or whatever, but how do we have a list of purchase orders, and each of those purchase orders has a list of detail lines? Okay, so a quick demonstration. This being a WPF application, the screen itself can be dragged in and out, maximized and things. And again, nothing is actually coded. It's not displaying at column 5, row 20. Everything is relative. This bit of the window takes up a third, and this bit's 2/3, and of that 2/3, half of it's going to display this. So as you move things around, it sorts that out. So Richard has done a few slides on what this looks like, but if I go into the suppliers, first of all, I get my list of suppliers, and as I navigate up and down, the details display. From the styles and things, it brings in, so as I actually hover over a field, the background frame of the field will change. I didn't realize even things like this were happening, although if you actually run Outlook, you'll see it doing exactly the same. So you have a visual indication of what the box actually is. And if I go in here and start typing something to change a value, then the buttons at the bottom here change to save and cancel. And also the list at the top greys out because it says don't be going hopping around half changing 3 or 4 different records. The application says no, you've started something, so you need to tell me whether you're happy with that change or whether you're going to cancel it. And I have, again, one of the things that was added in then, rather than just something that listed all the records, simple searches that I can put in at the top here. So if I wanted to search just for things that had the word company in it, up comes that. And then this is where I have the link that says basically take whatever you filtered here and print. There's just a normal, straightforward print API Synergy thing using a mixture of fonts, sizes and things like that. And I have a PDF version of that as well. And that was written in such a way that I have a print method that calls a utility method. And so the print program just says, I want to do a PDF or I want to do an API. And then the utility code says, oh, this is how we work with the SynPDF classes, or this is how I work with the handles and things on the print API. So again, it's very useful to see that structure of not just a form on the screen, but how does it pass things around, and how do you bring in other business logic and other utility libraries and things like that. And as Richard showed, the products one, which has all the same sort of functionality, except here we have an example of using tabs and tick boxes. And again, if I run a PDF of that, here you can see where we're using the SynPDF utilities, but we're bringing in pictures and products and colors and different fonts. We're printing our prices and things in a fixed font instead of a numeric font, and we're coloring this because we're making a loss on it rather than selling at a profit. So these are all practical examples which are there that can be drawn on, and it's all completely documented for how do you get an image onto a report, etc. And a quick look just finally, before I move on, at the orders. So what this does is here, the screen's split in 4. So we've got a list of the orders that we have, and then as I go through the orders, it automatically shows me the detail lines at the bottom. Also what I'm doing is I'm calculating totals here. So as I go in and change this, instead of it being 100 items, change it to 50 items. It then grays all of this out, tells me, well, what have you done with this detail line? So I'm going to save the change. This updates the totals. Now says you've changed the overall order, so what are you going to do? Are you going to cancel that, or are you going to save it? And so on. So that's basically where we are with the application at the minute. Now I want to go back and then, as I said, continue with how I applied that in a real life scenario. Okay, so I showed this to the client and they said, your font size is too small. We're looking at a screen all day long. We need to see things clearly. Also, all their transaction data entry was all numeric. Numeric customers, products, codes, quantities, prices. We don't want to be reaching across to a tab key every time we enter something on a transaction. We want to be able to use the enter key to move from one field to the next. We don't like your light blue and a dark blue background. We want to see something that's got more of a contrast in it, and some like light themes and some like dark themes, and whatever. I should also say, by the way, everything on the community project is done using straightforward out-of-the-box SAML. There are no third-party Infragistics or DevExpress controls, because it's letting you see the core underlying approach that's needed. Okay, I also had, this application has about 500 menu options. Someone mentioned yesterday about picking 5, 29, 23, 8, 7, 2 to get a particular report out. That's the way this application was. And of the 300 users in the application, many of them English isn't their first language, so a densely typed menu really wasn't going to cut it. Those examples I showed you, load all the suppliers or load all the products, and then you look to see which one you want. If you've 20,000 plus products, that's not really practical. So we said, well, okay, only load the list whenever you've actually entered some search criteria. I had to deal with the detail lines, because actually the client needed the detail lines before we'd got to that place in the community project. But the detail line processing then got passed back into it. I also then had not just one set of detail lines, but 3 sets of detail lines related to the product. And some of the stuff that was generated by CodeGen, I had a shock whenever I discovered then that all the stuff about automatically generating drills and things only worked on character fields, whereas all their key fields were numeric. Now Richard has then fed that back into the templates, and so we have a solution for that. Okay, so what does that actually look like? Basically, we came up with 3 different color schemes. So this was mainly a black and white scheme. This one was pretty much the same sort of screen as we had on the example, except we use a white font instead of the blue font. There's a light theme of it as well, but I'll work with this. Okay, so we pulled the things together into a graphical menu. Also, as you'll see, anything that's active, just as you hover over it, increases in size, and we put tooltips on a lot of the buttons and things in it. So here we organised it into files, transactions, cache and carry, whatever. We also pulled maybe what was 10 or 12 individual programs before for adding and changing products and adding a barcode into one screen. So we'll do a quick look at the suppliers. And here you'll see we have the list of all the suppliers. We've got a box with various tabs of header information. And then we've got detail line tabs at the bottom. And this is actually showing which products each supplier supplies and who the alternate supplier is and what the pack size is. We have introduced grid splitters, so I can see more of this. And as I move this box automatically, the font condenses down, so I still see all the details. And I have a grid splitter here, so that I can see more of the detail lines if I want. And if I wanted to see all the suppliers, who sold rice, and up it comes. And I've split this into part words, so from companies that have rice and TRS in the name, this will show that. Okay, so if I go to the product one, okay, as you can see here, everything is disabled, greyed out, blank, until I start keying in some keywords. So if I put in red and LEN for lentils, and I can say things like this, selling item only, and what's the pack size, and fill in all these various criteria. I can also key in a product code, and that will take me straight to the information I need. Okay, if I go to a particular product in the list, then you'll see the tabs of information that I have along here. And then you'll see this is a list of my barcodes for the products. And the current barcode that I have is expanded out at the bottom of the screen. And I have buttons here for adding and deleting. If I change a barcode, it's going to work exactly like the same thing. It's going to say you're going to add or change this. So I'll save that. And then I now have to save, cancel or save this. I have my supplier lookups. And so if I want to change who the supplier of that product was, I can do that. So I'll save that. And then I can take that and print that as an API report. Print it as a PDF, like so, which is just using colors and fonts and boxes and lines and things like that, all using the Syn PDF. And I have also an option here which will basically take the data that matches the current query. So there's the same data in an Excel format where it's been spaced out. And it's actually the same print routine that does that. It just says, what format do you want this in? So the print program is written exactly the same, and that's how it is. So hopefully that's given you some idea of how we've went about it and how we've been able to develop it as a community project and then take those bits and pieces. And as I said, the solution there for the detail lines was actually fed back into the community project so that we can then onward develop that, because I'm really keen to see this on a tablet with a different front end and whatever on it. So at the minute, now, and this is why I was going out to the ideas thing, and I think I really like the idea of the ideas and the answers and the questions that we have, because I've got this, but I've got 3 appstyling.xaml files and 2 sets of icons, and I have to do 3 builds in 3 different areas, and I would love to just sort of have this one build operation that gave me all 3 versions or some way of switching. But that's the beauty of this, because there's never an end point to it. There's always more to learn, and ways to improve it. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Anybody got any questions for either myself or Gordon, and as long as your name's not Gary? Yeah, well, basically the question is, who's in charge of the community project? Nobody's in charge of it. I sort of adjudicate it a little bit, but I really don't want to be a sort of forceful hand and say, you will not do this. Some of the stuff, when people add stuff, I do review it, as Alan will testify, and then I'll send a nice little email to say, what are you doing? But the nice thing about the way we're doing it, Alan will add something, we'll all discuss it via email, and then he'll do it right the second time. I'm only joking, Alan. No, and then we formulate not only say maybe a more appropriate way of doing it, but an understanding of why that's a more appropriate way. So it's not just you've done it wrong, do it this way. It's that's not quite right. This is why it's not quite right. How would you now do it? And then he comes back and says, yeah, you're getting there, but what about this bit? All right, and then we end up with a solution. So there's no, you will do it this way type approach. So I guess at the moment it's just via email, because there's not many of us, but there's no reason why we can't set up some sort of forum to have a more open and wider discussion if there's more and more people want to be involved in this. Okay. Yes, sir.
You know, at the beginning of your presentation, you said I'm going to keep a blog or whatever of what I've done and some of your light bulb moments, which obviously you didn't go into too much here. Mm-hmm. But there must be a huge conceptual metamorphosis you have to undergo when you're going from traditional Synergy to this. And there must have been some point where all of a sudden I understand that, or here's some steps along the understanding that. I understand, you know, right now maybe it's not the time to go into all that, but do you have that? Is
there access to basically the blog, the document that says this was how we did it, this is when it made sense? And yes, that's now about 110 pages or so, and it goes through and it'll say, this is what we do, this is what we did, this is what I had to learn, and then at the end of that I would say, right, okay, now this is really how you need to organize things, and this is what goes on in the view, and this is what goes on in the view model, and this is what goes on in the model, and then there's examples that follow that through. But yes, the idea was to try to get across not just here's instructions for how to put an image on this, but to give a context of someone coming on that journey that says these are the, and it sort of builds progressively, because I think that's also a key thing. We didn't write in and write purchase order entry and then write a print program and then say, but job's done. We started off really baby steps. We spent probably about the first 2 months just doing nothing but writing the routine that created the files. Richard said, write something that's going to create files, and of course I created the files, opened them, imported on a channel, did stores against them, and he said, right, okay, we'll do this with file objects. What are file objects? And so you led into that, and again, all of that is documented as we went through that process.
And doing it that way, he was allowed to do comparisons between a regular language read, store, delete, to a file I/O operation, to a Symphony Harmony query, or instruction, or command. Okay, so the going through that iterative process allowed him to understand and show in code the differences between the three, because they all do the same thing. They all read a record and write a record. They just do it in a different way. So both with the community code that we're putting together, which is significantly OO based, the vast majority of it, and Gordon's document that talks about why he's doing certain things a certain way in OO, so why he's extended a class. Well, by doing that, I get everything that I did have and lots that I've just added. And I put a link on my presentation bit to the YouTube, the Synergex YouTube channel. Yet, at the moment, I think, is it out yet, or is it coming out, the autonomy of Synergy, where we talk about an alpha type? You all know that what an alpha type is. If you get a new hire, they might not do, so that's relevant to them. But in the not too distant future, there'll be, so what is a class in what is a class in Synergy? How do we extend a class in Synergy? What's a property? Why do you have them? So those sort of snippet 5-minute videos will soon, very quickly, very quickly, Jacqueline's nodding, will be added to the YouTube. So with the Synergex YouTube, the videos there, the document that Gordon's putting together, and the community project, it's all designed to say, okay, I know Synergy, I've been writing Synergy for 50 billion years, I'm brilliant at it, what the hell's all this code? And a way to try and get you into that. Okay, well, thank you for listening, and very much thank you for Gordon to coming up and giving a demo of what he's done. Thank you.